Welcome, everybody. This is week 0 of our Sci-Fi Bootcamp, which is going to be a 4-week course that's going to help you get totally ready to write a sci-fi feature by the end of it, or a pilot, and it should transition really nicely into one of our other bootcamp classes. So by going through this whole course, you'll get all the beats down and all the outlining done, so you're ready to write your sci-fi project right afterwards. Let's take a look at what we'll be doing today. So this course is on ScriptCamp, of course. ScriptCamp being our Discord community that is focused on helping you get from idea to first draft to more polished script. We have lots of free events and workshops and classes like this one that you're in right now, but we also have paid courses such as the remainder of this series, or many others, such as our feature TV and rewrite bootcamps, and our Writers Lab, which is on weekends, Saturdays from 4 to 6. So we have many different features and things that you can access for free on ScriptCamp, but also if you want to go further in these bootcamp courses and, for instance, write a full feature in just 8 weeks, or write a TV script in just 6 weeks, then this is the place to sign up and be a member. The bootcamps, we go from idea to first draft, except for the rewrite, which goes from first draft to polished draft, but we're using our step-by-step step-by-step practical method and these 2-hour weekly meetings in order to get all of your ducks in a row before you start the script. So we focus on this really organized method wherein we are figuring out what happens on every single page of the story before you start actually, formatting and writing that in the software and stuff. So we have 8 weeks for the feature, 6 weeks for TV. We've done 4 weeks for pitching, horror thriller, and these sort of mini genre boot camps like this. We had a 6-week stage play class, which the recordings are up on our library for members as well. So if you become a member, you can access recordings of all of the previous classes we've done, and just get access to a bunch more workshops and events, and you just get more. So if you're not enrolled yet and you want to enroll, you can go to scriptcamp.net/classes and buy the course on its own, or you can become a member, sign up for your free trial for membership, which lasts for 2 weeks and gets you access to everything that we do. You can do that now by going to scriptcamp.net/membership. If you want to sign up, you can let us know in the chat, and we can give you access to the private chat channels and our library and things like that. If you are planning on signing up but you're not able to do it right away, or you were just you're planning on doing it soon, so let us know. Let's look at what we're doing today. So this is the overview of the entire sci-fi course, starting with week 0 there for July 9th. That's today. So we're going to start today by really nailing down what we're doing with this genre and what are these specific promises and what are the things that the audience is coming in looking for, and what are the things that we have to kind of keep in mind when we are orchestrating not just the structure of our idea, but how do we choose the idea itself, because there is this inherent promise in sci-fi of something new and original, or some new and different way of thinking about things. And ideas are so key to just the entire idea, the whole genre of sci-fi itself, that we will spend a lot of today talking less about the particulars of any kind of structure or any kind of subgenre, because sci-fi comes in so many subgenres, and we'll be talking more about like how to come up with sci-fi ideas and what are sort of the pitfalls and responsibilities of a sci-fi writer. So we're going to look at interesting questions related to technology and the news, and there's going to be a lot of volunteer sort of space here where people can come up, and we're going to do a lot of critical thinking based on these trends in technology that we're seeing in top news stories that I've just picked from like 5 or 10 of them. And we will come up with story ideas based on those, think of different genres we can turn those things into. And just for the first half of class, I really want to make sure we get to that and do as much of that as we can. So I'm going to go kind of quick through the early stuff where it's like, what's a sci-fi movie? We want to make sure we're doing as much of that kind of active critical thinking as we can. We're going to just go over the basics of 3-act structure and loglines, and we'll have the intention of being able to look at student loglines today in preparation for moving ahead in the course. You're going to want to have that one feature that's the thing that you're writing, or a TV pilot. I mean, features are where my strengths lie, and you will get I think that it is slightly easier to write a TV or to write a sci-fi feature than it is to write a sci-fi TV pilot. There's just so many other things that you have to worry about. So if you're wondering which one you should do, I'd recommend just doing a movie first, but it's ultimately up to you. In any case, we will be looking at how to write a logline for that. So during the first half of this class, you should be, as we're doing this preparation and this brainstorming and stuff, you just in the back of your mind can be thinking, what might the story that I want to work on be? What is that logline? What big idea do I want to explore? And then in our second half of class, we'll have time to look at student loglines and offer that early level of feedback so that by next week, you can be that much closer to nailing down the final version of it. Logline, if you don't know, that's that one-sentence expression that tells us what your movie is about. Week 1 is going to be finalizing loglines, so next week by the end of next session, next Saturday from the same time, you're going to want to nail that logline down so it's done. That's the movie you're working on. So if you're still trying to come up with what your idea is and trying to settle on an idea, that's okay. You have a week to do it. And this class is sort of supposed to get your gears turning or your, circuits firing or whatever we want to say for sci-fi. So you're going to finish that logline by the end of next weekend's session, and also this whole week you'll be filling out your sketchbook, which is like a collage of all your ideas, inspirations, influences, and just everything else you want to gather, because you're in the gathering phase, you're not quite in the building phase yet. Week 2 is going to be on developing that world and the idea of world building, and we are also going to play around with different sci-fi worlds and settings and how to actually create a workable setting on a planet that is not Earth. Like, what does a space colony actually need? How do we approach different systems of government and different populations and different races and species of aliens and creatures and cyborgs and all these things? So week 3 will be all about that really fun world-building stuff that sci-fi authors just love to get their hands really dirty in. And by the end of that week, the goal is to develop your protagonist and antagonist and just start fleshing out your story world and its rules a bit more. Week 3 is going to be on those big blockbuster moments, those awesome moments that make you stand up and cheer. And that's what you're going to sort of use as these big tentpole moments in your structure that you're going to be working backwards from or working up towards. And so you're going to want to make sure to complete your story beats outline by the end of that class, which is that framework for your entire movie. Then our final meeting, which is going to be on August 6th, is on genre and structure. And by the end of that class, you want to complete your... by the end of that week, you want to complete your scene cards, which is going to be full paragraph for every single scene in the entire movie, so you know what happens on every page. And maybe even get so far as to write your opening scene. But the point is, you're going to be ready to start writing pages by August 13th, if you follow along with the benchmarks of the course. So thanks for being here. I'm glad to have so many folks in the room for this. Let's get going, just because we have so very much to do. I will be taking questions on a rolling basis as we go, so make sure to use that text chat. On the left-hand side of your Discord window, you'll find Sci-Fi Class. If you scroll to the bottom of the folder called Discussion, so at the bottom there you'll find Sci-Fi Class, and you can put your questions and comments there. And I will read them out as we are going, and sometimes I will be calling on people and saying, who wants to answer this? And you can, if I call out, you can either answer on text or on voice. Okay, let's just jump in. So, overview of this class. We'll start with bootcamp ground rules and just some basic things to maybe have you rule out very quickly, because they will just lead to lots of problems. Just so that we make sure to get that off the table first thing, and just give you some ideas of the kinds of ideas that work really well for bootcamp. We will next look at what is sci-fi. That question we have to do in every genre. It's just like, what is this? What are we trying to accomplish here? And we have to look at the distinction between hard and soft sci-fi, which is kind of one of those just basic areas of discussion that everyone has some kind of, every sci-fi story falls somewhere on the spectrum in terms of rules and technical accuracy and things like that. So we will break down those differences there. Tones, flavors, and subgenres, we just want to make sure that we have a sort of shared vocabulary in terms of what are the basic what are some of the basic groundwork rules and terms that we need to know going into this, just from a background or from the history of the genre that has led up until now, making sure that we just have the same idea of what some of these things are and how they're working and what these terms actually are standing for. We can look at some big ideas next, which is going to be a big list of topics, because so much of sci-fi is not really as much a description of what's going to happen in the plot as it is telling you the kinds of elements and ideas that will be in the story, because a sci-fi movie can be, we'll talk more about this, but a sci-fi movie can be an action story, or it can be a romance story, or it can be a comedy or a drama, or it can be anything. It's just really telling you the types of subject matter that will be explored in that world. So we will need to look at those different topics and decide which areas have been less or more explored, and link them to some technological stories coming out of headlines today, so we can start to brainstorm some plots that might come from these different story seeds and think of where are these trends actually leading, and what kinds of interesting directions for humanity, the planet, society, do they sort of unlock in the storytelling world. So critical thinking is going to be like I mentioned, the name of the game today, and we're going to break down a couple news stories and try to figure out where's the entertainment in these things. And last, we'll look at loglines, which is going to be a review of whatever you have. It's okay if it's not totally finished by the time we post and share it, or if you're trying to decide between a few of them, it's okay to have a couple, up to 3, that you're working on. But for this first half of class, just have your notepad open, have your Google Doc open, and be just trying to figure out what movie would I want to spend 8 weeks, or what is it? We're giving you longer time if you actually are doing this 4-week preparation first. But what movie would I want to commit, the next 2 months-ish of my life to taking on? And start trying to arrange that into a logical one-sentence expression of the premise. But it's okay if you don't get that done today. That's all just to get your, get those circuits firing for next week. Next weekend is when the logline should be finished by. You have a long time to settle things into place before then. So enjoy the process and just try to get your mind working and immerse yourself in the kinds of ideas that you could do. Because sci-fi is so much about the idea. So just ground rules first of all. You probably don't want to do a time travel movie. And I know so many people love time travel, and it's one of the first things they think of when it comes to sci-fi. I will just guarantee you it's really difficult to write in 8 weeks, or even any amount of time. We don't want the main notes that you're getting, especially if you're pretty early in your writing sort of journey. You don't want all the notes to be about the paradoxes. You want the notes to be about the character moments and the emotion and those things that really matter. And it becomes very difficult to juggle certain plot elements if you're not really experienced in this medium. Those things are clones, or anytime there's copies of multiple characters. Alternate dimensions, which would be the same sort of deal, or parallel realities kind of thing. And last would be body switching. I've never seen somebody really able to keep a body switching script clear and straight on the page as to who's doing what. And you might not think of those things as huge problems, but I have always seen them be huge problems, even in professional work. So just beware of time travel and anything with multiple copies of the same characters. I'm not going to say you can't do those things, but just be aware there are huge pitfalls there, and you will probably run into them. Besides that, we say no true stories, which obviously it can't be sci-fi if it's a true story. We say no anthologies, so please just stick to... For the most part at Script Camp, we're not writing anthologies, we're writing full-length pilots and features, and we say no rewrites or adaptations either. This is based on the idea of writing a brand new thing. Bootcamps are usually going to be, except for our rewrite-focused ones, they're going to be emphasizing something totally new. Just take a big swing and maybe write something wacky and crazy that you think would never get made, or would be massive budget. Like, sci-fi so often requires these huge budgets to pull off. If you're pretty far along in your career, you have to be more focused on movies that could actually potentially be made. But if you're early on and just starting and just want to get into sci-fi or fantasy writing, you can take these giant swings and you can write something that would have no chance of getting made, just because that is the kind of thing that you would want for your portfolio. Let's look at one more slide here. So yeah, last couple ground rules. Remember to get used to this idea of sharing your work with me and with other students and with everybody, even at these early stages, even if it's not fully formed or whatever. You just need to start getting used to the idea of, I'm going to get feedback on the dough of my bread, or so to speak. The dough needs to be good before the bread can be good. So remember to get ready to start getting feedback on incomplete ideas. Moving forward, after this class, you'll have to use your real name to be in the boot camps. You can keep it as a username for today, but we can't use usernames in the industry or in further classes, so just be prepared to start using a real name after this one session. Okay, let's keep going. So what is sci-fi? Let's just get into some of these fundamental breakdown parts of this. So via Britannica, which is where I'm getting the definition here, fiction that principally deals with the impact of actual or imagined science on society or individuals. And we might say for this, most of the time this is going to be science that is out of our current reach of capabilities. If it's all stuff that could happen today, you're gonna struggle to get people to agree it's sci-fi a lot of the time. But it might touch on any number of things, such as these warnings about the future or where things are going, these utopian aspirations or imaginary worlds, or these big disasters or cautionary tales or strange different planets or speculative political scenarios, or any number of things. It can be presented in any tone or any style, such as these very quiet character pieces or really loud action movies or satire or allegory. Any attitude towards the process of technosocial change, from cynical despair to cosmic bliss, as they put it here. So this can come in almost any single flavor and tone, but there are certain things that are always pretty much going to be the same. And that one of those consistent things is that everything's going to fall somewhere on the spectrum of hard to soft sci-fi. There's hard and soft fantasy, there's hard and soft sci-fi. What this really comes down to is technical specifics and just strictness of rules. Hard sci-fi is going to be stories that focus on science and technology as integral elements of the plot and are applying more sort of real-world rules to how they work. So science should be based on proven principles, even if they are being extrapolated to, let's say, it's the far future, but we're like, I'm going to have ships be able to, leap to a super fast speed, but it's going to be something that, they have. I really make sure to detail that they have all of the proper insulation and shielding, and I've measured. You don't have to do all this work yourself, but you should, look into what it would actually take to actually shield a ship from jumping into warp speed or coming out of it. You have put thought into whether or not this tech is theoretically ever going to be possible, and it might be in 100 years we are, inferring that what we have is going to be at that level at that point. So it just means that you've put more thought into the technical side of things here. The emphasis is on this plausibility and this strict set of rules, which might hinge on applications of math or physics or chemistry or anything else in in hard data. So there's no fantasy on this far end of hard sci-fi, and there's less of this emphasis on sense of wonder. Although you will still get that sense of wonder sometimes. But if your sci-fi is really, 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 really hard, all the way on let's say the left side of the spectrum here, then you might struggle to get to some of those big wondrous moments than you would see in soft sci-fi. For instance, a giant robot, the size of a mech or the size of a building. Not really possible in a strictly Earth type of environment due to how gravity works in something called the square cubed law. And so you're gonna have to err on the side of realism when it comes to hard sci-fi, even if you're expanding principles beyond where they're currently capable of going. Some examples might be something like Ex Machina, or The Martian, or Gravity, Interstellar, Contact, Moon, and Jurassic Park, which Jurassic Park is kind of it gets to kind of crazy places, but everything is couched in such explanations of what's going on and real discussion of DNA and cloning and these things that were a lot in the public consciousness in the 90s as well. So you can see how even if we get to this place that maybe we never could have gotten in real life, it's at least nominally in this foundation of real science. And then on the other end, we have soft sci-fi, and the picture there that we have in the background is Star Wars, and Star Wars is space fantasy that includes some soft sci-fi, some would say, because Star Wars has straight up magic in it. So if the moment it has actual magic in it, we can't really say it's straight sci-fi anymore. I mean, there's wizards and witches in Star Wars. It's not exactly the traditional sci-fi. You could say it's pulp space fantasy. But the point is that you can see why that might be used as the example image here, because that is sort of the other end, where it's like, do we really need to go into a lot of details on how exactly an X-Wing is able to jump to light speed and then come out of light speed without tearing the pilot apart, or any of these things where it's like these questions of physics. Why is there sound in space? Why are there explosions in space? I don't really know. It looks cool is kind of a fine answer in soft sci-fi. So characters and relationships are much more important in soft. Science only really needs to be consistent in its own world. So for instance, if we're saying explosions cause sound and flame in space in Star Wars, I have no idea why, but if they do, then they always have to do that, or else it's going to start to feel weird and like you're breaking your own rules. So that internal sense of consistency is the one thing you really need to get in place in soft. But it's going to largely have this stronger emphasis on social sciences in any case, such as think of alternate sociology, economics, or politics, or things like that. Tech level, you can use so much sort of hand-waving in the rules that it just crosses basically into fantasy, but it still has that veneer of plausibility. So it should seem like there is some kind of rational explanation in this world. The Force does not count as a rational explanation, no matter how many midi-chlorians are involved. So there's some examples of this might be something like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, or Back to the Future, or Inception, or Avatar, Iron Giant. So anything where we don't need to think through the rules and specifics of what's going on too carefully. Anything where there's psychic powers, or something that seems to border on magic, nanite control that allows characters to do sort of wizardish things like an upgrade. Any questions on this distinction here between hard and soft sci-fi? And feel free to either type or use your mic.
Oh, I can't find the chat box for a second. So I was going to ask, what is Minority Report? Is that soft? mystery sci-fi? Or
It is softer because it involves magic powers. The psychics that are at the foundation of pre-crime, which is the sort of big idea of Minority Report,
right,
it doesn't
right,
even attempt to explain, at least in the movie, it doesn't even attempt to explain why there's people who can see the future.
right.
So
Yet it's not fantasy either. It's kind of like a soft
yeah,
sci-fi.
it's like the softest you can get. It's like they are basically magic people that are in charge of a police institution. I think that's the difference. That's what makes it feel more like soft sci-fi is the fact that those psychics are the foundation of a police unit that's going to be used to stop crime.
Yes, that
So
makes sense.
so it's
Yeah.
like they're made a part of a sci-fi world. It doesn't feel like, oh, our main character is a psychic that uses his visions to stop crimes from happening. It's more like they are integrated into a sci-fi world a little bit more, so it doesn't feel like it's a stray fantasy element as much. But yeah, it's as soft as it gets with, I don't know, they can see the future.
Cool, cool.
Are alien invasion soft sci-fi?
Alien invasions? Was that the question?
Yeah, are they soft sci-fi?
It depends how they're done. I mean, you can do a story about an alien invasion in which you have really thought through the specific physics and rules of how the aliens would get to Earth and what they would really be like and what do they really want. And then you could do a story that's like Mars Attacks, right? Which is like a cartoon where they show up in flying saucers and they shoot giant lasers because they're evil. Hard sci-fi would probably have more emphasis on they have some kind of logical reason behind why they, some sort of actual really clear logical plan for what they want to do with Earth. Look at something like Spielberg's War of the Worlds, in which their goal is to sort of terraform Earth, and they have like a real actual way of doing that. They use this kind of red fungus that they put everywhere, which is supposed to transform the atmosphere. And by the end, the aliens get killed by germs, don't they? So that's a very hard version of that idea. And then we have, so it's like, yeah, on one end we have War of the Worlds, and on the other end we have Mars Attacks. So just the fact that it involves aliens is no more or less plausible than anything else. In fact, the general consensus in the most scientific communities is that aliens are like essentially guaranteed to exist somewhere in the galaxy. So I hope that answers that question. You can do almost any plot element either way.
Question.
Sure.
What if you do have a very adherent hard science sort of thing, but you are, like in your soft science stories, we're focusing on character instead of world? Like, characters and relationships are important, but the science is also you're trying your damnedest to stay consistent to like a almost no magic sort of deal.
It sounds like you're just somewhere on the spectrum because this isn't like a hard cutoff. This is more like it's like a line that you might exist anywhere on. So some stories have elements of both hard and soft science, or just like some stories have elements of both hard and soft fantasy. So you have to kind of find a balance for yourself that works. And if you're like, I'm going to, like, think of Star Trek, for instance. A lot of Star Trek plots will involve actual scientific principles in some way. Usually they're more like, on this planet, everyone behaves like a cowboy or whatever, like that, and we're going to sort of study the sociological reasons why that's the case. Something like that, whereas it's like, how do we warp out, or like, how do we give Scotty enough time to type in the flimflammer into the flabbergaster? It's like, well, he needs 30 seconds. Okay, so we understand that if we give him 30 seconds, he can put the flimflammer in the flabbergaster. But, like, the point is that you can have different levels of adherence to science within the same work of fiction. It's just going to put you somewhere in that middle ground between them.
All right, I think I get it.
Cool. Monica says, Independence Day isn't that far off. Kepler's system has multiple planets with liquid water, but it would take 1 million years to get there without FTL. So, yeah, Independence Day, I'm not exactly sure where it falls between them. It definitely, I like the scale of the ships and stuff. It does feel like these aliens actually do have the resources and capability to perhaps devastate Earth's major cities. I would have to review it to actually look at the plausibility of the different things in it. I think it has some softer and some harder stuff. I'm not quite sure on Independence Day. But it does have if I remember correctly, it does have aliens that have psychic adjacent powers, and also they're pretty evil. The humans even ask what they want, and they're just like, die, basically, which tends to be on the much softer end. Alien Boy asks, is Pacific Rim hard sci-fi? No. It's not possible to have a construct of that size, or a creature of the size of kaiju, because of what we call the square cube law. So by it's just that genre of mecha and kaiju stuff is inherently softer just because the basic principles of it are not possible. A creature that was that big couldn't move because it would be too heavy in order, like, it would not be strong enough to move its own limbs. It's just this weird thing where, like, it sort of feels like it should be possible for a creature or machine to be that big, but just due to how gravity works on Earth, it's not really possible on Earth for creatures to be that big. So I would say Pacific Rim inherently soft. Plus, it involves psychic links between drivers and stuff. It's like, you know, it's pretty soft.
Because, like you said, hard does focus on like the technological stuff, and like Pacific Rim does go into how the mechs work in the technical sort of stuff.
Sure. It does go a bit into how they work, but they work in a way that can never happen on Earth, at least. Like, just the fact that they are that size means inherently they couldn't really function on Earth. And also, like I said, the sort of psychic powers that the bond that has to be shared between the two drivers. It's a kind of arbitrary rule that works for what it is, but I wouldn't call it particularly based on real principles. Good questions, though, from everybody. So, promise and genre conventions. So, sci-fi is going to emphasize originality more than almost any other genre. So, part of the promise, the inherent promise here, is something that we haven't seen before exactly like this. That means some element of speculation on the world, or where we're going as a species, or the effect that certain technologies are going to have, or do currently have, on human nature. So, social commentary is actually really key, and it's impossible to keep out of sci-fi stories. And we could, in fact, if we look at some recent examples, we can especially see subtlety is optional. Sci-fi has there are definitely some very subtle versions of this, but there's also some that are just straight in-your-face allegories. We could look at something like what's it called? Don't Look Up, which is sort of just saying what it's about. And very blatant, sort of like clear allegorical sci-fi has a rich history and should absolutely be considered valid as well. We're going to heavily emphasize, though, it's more important than worrying about subtlety is worrying about, is your idea on the sort of cutting edge? Are we emphasizing cutting edge ideas and progressive values? This is not a space for old ways of thinking or conservative ideas. Sci-fi is about how things could be, and it's sort of one of the more progressive genres in that way. Like, if you are going into this space, you are approaching it with the promise of, I'm going to speculate as to what could happen next and how things could change. We're not thinking of how things could go back to how they were or how they could stay the same. So the other big promise here is just a certain kind of coolness factor. We just want to see awesome and unique imagery and character moments and thrills that are made possible only in the world that contains your speculative elements. That's why we want to base your sort of key premise moments and your most awesome premise scenes. A lot of the time should be something that could only happen in your particular world. Think of something like Edge of Tomorrow, where our main character is a soldier who keeps resetting time every time he dies, and so he partners with another soldier that is much more experienced than him, and they have to sort of work together to take down this alien queen. And the dynamic of their relationship is that every time he sort of messes up, she realizes that he's the only way they're going to reset time. His death is the thing that resets time, so she just kills him again and again and again. How often do we get stories where the main character's mentor kills them constantly every time they mess up? Like, we want to see you explore the cool things that are offered only in your world and use those as much as possible. Find as many entertaining avenues for showcasing those as you can. So most common movie genres are going to fall into a couple of these categories here. There are more than these, and there are exceptions to these, but like, this is a lot of it. When you say sci-fi, people are going to think it's one of these. We have thriller or horror, which you're going to find things like Alien or The Fly and The Invisible Man. Action, which would be stuff like Tenet or The Matrix. We have adventure, which is I distinctify those by saying action is about interpersonal violence between intelligent entities. Whereas, so that's, people versus people, people versus aliens, people versus monsters or robots or something like that. Whereas adventure is about danger and high stakes, but without that element of personal. It might still have a little bit of violence, but it's less focused on that violence and more about how do we stop this dangerous threat. So think like Armageddon, Interstellar, Gravity, where it's not really about people fighting each other. It's about them confronting some deadly other threat using technological means. We have drama as our last one, which is going to be stuff like Her, or Arrival, or The Truman Show, where it's mostly going to be about the interaction of the characters and their interpersonal relationships that we are either exploring through a technological means, or we are perhaps exploring despite some kind of technological conceit or premise that is at place in the worlds. But there's more of these. This is just gonna be what people are mostly thinking of. So if you don't know what else to do, probably pick one of these genres here. But there's room to do anything. If you really want to do a sci-fi comedy, you can. If you really want to do, a sci-fi, sci-fi romance, something like that, then no one's stopping you. But this is the assumptions. Let's look at some subgenres and just look at a couple of examples of these things. This is far from a comprehensive list, but this is just some of the ones that you should know these terms. We have things like alternate history, which are going to be scripts that are set in worlds that are affected by major events in history occurring differently, such as The Man in the High Castle or the show called For All Mankind on Apple. Which, imagine what would Earth be like if the space race, I guess, I forget the premise of For All Mankind, but it's like the Americans maybe didn't land on the moon or something like that, but the space race really heats up between America and Russia much more than it really did. Man in the High Castle is asking...
Excuse me?
So I think somebody...
Yeah, just to help you. Just to help you. Very much. For All Mankind is like, what if it was the Russians that landed on the moon first, and this, like, I guess, jumpstarts the space race,
Cool.
or like the space race continue.
Thank you for that. Okay, so yeah, that's that alternate history. It's saying, what if the Russians won the space race, and thus we sort of extrapolate what might happen next. And then we have, sorry, I'm pulling up my slideshow. Here it is, Cyberpunk, which is going to be, it has a whole lot of its own rules and conventions to it, and ideas behind it, and it has its own the whole punk subgenre has these sort of literary themes and roots that you should probably study if you're going to be writing about these things. The punk suffix sort of emphasizes that it's like a response to society in some kind of way. Like, we look at trends and where they're going, and we sort of say, like, cyberpunk, for instance, is envisioning a future in which corporations pretty much run everything. So we're taking, like, the negative parts of modern society and blowing them up to, like, 100 times their size. So saying, how, like, Amazon and Google are controlling everything. Well, in this world, Amazon and Google control, like, the nation as city-states, as, like, a series of warring city-states or factions. So the idea of corporations taking over or running things is really, really key to cyberpunk. And also, it's just about the people that rebel against that system. People who live in, like, crappy urban apartments who are, secretly hackers, or people who are trying to fight against this oppressive system. It has some crossover with noir. It has some crossover with action and with mystery. And, there's just a lot of stuff in cyberpunk that you should look into if you are into that sort of stuff. It has its own very clear, distinct rules and world to it. We have dystopia, which I think we're all very familiar with, and often cyberpunk will have elements of dystopia, but these are stories that are focused on detailing a struggle between characters and some kind of government or institution, or the whoever's running the place where they live in a kind of negative way, which might be designed in such a way as to highlight the flaws of real world governments or societies or problems. So, for instance, we might say, it's a fascist dystopia, so it's kind of like the Nazis run everything. That's like, The Man in the High Castle. Or it might be a dystopia that's based on, I don't know, a racist dystopia where, only one race is the supreme one, and every other race are slaves to them. It might be like that. So we try to pick one or two things to base that dystopia around, usually, and that will give that clarity to it. We have farces, something like Bill and Ted, where ostensibly we're using sci-fi sorts of elements and imagery, but we aren't really actually abiding by any real rules or principles. We have everything there from you got your Bill and Ted, your Futurama, your Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, stuff like that. Then we have military sci-fi, which is pretty common. That's your Aliens, your Edge of Tomorrow, space marines and soldiers that are either fighting other space marines and soldiers, or perhaps fighting aliens or robots or something. So you see this in all the James Cameron stuff. You'll see space marines in Terminator, and in I guess they're not from space if they're in Terminator, but you get the idea. This is the Warhammer 40K kind of thing, where it's going to be about the military organization versus some kind of threat that is based in sci-fi, or they're using some sci-fi element to combat that threat. We have New Weird, which is kind of hard to define exactly, or I'm not the best at defining this one, but from my best understanding of it is that it's going to be sci-fi that is combining elements of either cosmic horror or a little bit of fantasy that is sort of worked in, or just the elements that are unexplainable, like things that are beyond our comprehension that are kind of woven into however the stuff in the movie's working. So Annihilation might be an example of that, but this is not really a movie genre. We have a question in the chat. Was there sci-fi in the Hunger Games? Yeah, Hunger Games is set in a post-apocalyptic world that is a dystopia that is risen from the ashes of a destroyed America. So absolutely, yeah, there's definitely sci-fi elements in the Hunger Games. We have social sci-fi or satire. That would be something like The Lobster or Idiocracy, where we're using elements of society that have been exaggerated in some kind of way to make some kind of social point. So The Lobster is about relationships, and it's set in a kind of dystopia where people can, if you become single for long enough, you get put in this weird hotel that you're forced to make a connection with someone else there and have them be your sort of assigned partner by the end of it, or else they will turn you into an animal to sort of punish you. So it's like sort of weird, surreal, comedic sci-fi satire. We have Idiocracy, which is about a guy that it's like Futurama. He gets thrown into the future. He gets like frozen for 1 billion years, and he wakes up in America where everyone's way stupider than they are now because they've gone down. We can easily say we're seeing the trend of everyone's getting dumber over time. So it's sort of taking that literally. Space opera is going to be stuff like your Star Trek, and your Star Wars is also space opera, but with more fantasy elements to it. But that's going to be, people on spaceships. Often it's going to involve either elements of military sci-fi or perhaps sort of sword and planet kind of stuff, which is to say, imagining sort of kingdoms and medieval hierarchies in space will sometimes be a big part of that. We might have galactic federations and empires, and it's going to be about like the conflicts between military bodies and sometimes with different species. And this is the genre of all of these where you can kind of get away with having different kinds of aliens just baked into the world of what you're doing. Although that does get complicated and tricky. On week 3, we'll talk more about just designing different species of alien and stuff like that. But for the most part, try to stick with humans unless you know what you're doing there. And then we have steampunk, which we may have seen. Some people may have seen stuff like this before. There's steampunk conventions where people dress up in funny, silly stovepipe hats with pistons and gears on them and stuff. And this is sci-fi that's set in the past, usually around the Industrial Revolution, but there's different sort of like other punk versions that come from different eras. And we say, what if steam power had the ability to power way more complex machinery, or to do things that it just couldn't do, or it worked at a scale that it never did. So we have, giant tanks that are running on steam. We have robots that are running on steam, computers running on steam, things like that. It's like a historical-based sci-fi speculative story. And then we have superhero, which we're not going to talk about as much just because so much superhero stuff drifts so far from sci-fi that it just becomes fantasy. I mean, no matter how they try to explain it away. Is X-Men actually based in sci-fi? No. I mean, everyone gets a gene, and the gene gives you a random superpower that could do anything from you can shoot lightning to you run around on all fours like a toad to you grow blue hair all over you to you can shoot lasers to, like, that's just fantasy. We're not even pretending that that's actually kind of a real thing. But Iron Man I picked as the example here because within Iron Man, the first one I'm talking about, all of the sources of the sci-fi are coming from the same place, which is kind of key to making things feel cohesive. Like the arc reactor that Tony Stark is using to make his suit is also the technology that the villain uses to make his really big, evil, bulky suit. So that one, out of all of them, is a little more couched in sci-fi, but again, we don't want to get too far into superheroes here for the most part. Usually superhero media is not that concerned with sci-fi elements. Okay, let's keep going here, just because I want to make sure we have as much time as possible. And feel free, again, just because I'm not pausing for questions that much, use that chat. If you have questions or comments, feel free to make them, and I'll be checking constantly. So let's make sure we know what some of these genre terms or ideas are meaning. I think in the chat a minute ago, Monica used the term FTL. Do you want to start there? Monica, define FTL for us.
Sure, faster than light travel.
Mm-hmm. And what are the implications or importance of this?
Basically just that you can go several thousand or million light years distance without destroying the ship, killing everyone, or taking all of that time. So like most famously in Star Trek, you're going to get like warp 50 or whatever. I don't know what they go like warp 20 or something, and they can get across entire galaxies. But it's still actually, in terms of getting them to the other side of the universe, it's still like in Voyager, canonically would take them like 100 years. Anyway.
And it breaks one of Einstein's like fundamental theories, right? So
I believe so. Yeah, I think faster than light travel, as far as we understand it, could not really happen like it does in most movies and TV shows. But it's one of those things that it's so baked into the genre at this point that if you use the word, people will know what you mean. Sometimes we'll have some ships in some series will have like an FTL engine or something like that, which is sort of one of these things that is used to justify or kind of explain how it works. But the more you get into explaining it, the sort of more problems you'll run into sometimes. So it's best to just sort of make it feel like, oh, that's the engine that's in charge of that. It works because it works, and don't play with it too much. And FTL is important because it's going to allow your characters to travel between different star systems in less than what normally you got to go to sleep in the pod for years and years in order to get from one place to another because we just can't travel there. And also part of the fantasy of FTL is the fantasy that you wouldn't hit anything on the way there, which is why in Dune only characters who use this kind of almost magic drug called spice can chart astrogation can make astrogation leaps because they are able to sort of like psychically make all the calculations to predict how you won't hit anything on the way. So like you should just know what FTL is and how it's kind of working if you're going to have this sort of stuff in your story. Let's go down the list. So we have cyberspace here, which cyberspace refers, it feels a little dated to use this at this point, but it sort of refers to the virtual world, which might be kind of like in 90s movies, we'd see people representing cyberspace as like a sort of Tron type physical space that you can actually physically go into. There was sort of an obsession with cyberspace in 90s movies to the extent that almost a lot of franchises had the cyberspace movie, or even Hellraiser had like a VR cyberspace kind of entry in the franchise. We used to be more fascinated with this idea of virtual worlds. Now that this is more commonplace, we're a little less fascinated and a little less mystified by how certain elements of cyberspace are working, so you can't get away with as much of this nowadays. Uplifting. Does anyone know this one?
Does it have to do with like gravity?
No, this has to do with species that are less intelligent than humans.
So like turning them into humanized.
Yeah, just making things smarter, basically. So Planet of the Apes, we take apes and we are uplifting them to human intelligence. So it doesn't have to just be animals. I mean, if you have an alien species that needs to be uplifted in intelligence, or sometimes if aliens meet people in your stories, maybe the people could even uplift, or maybe the aliens could even uplift the people, like what happens in Arrival. So you can do lots with this. This is not that explored, so I'd recommend maybe looking into this a little more if this sounds interesting to you. Biodomes, or these dome-based colonies, I think we all kind of know what this is. This is like a bubble shield that protects an area of agriculture or some kind of enclave from a harsh environment. Force fields and hard light. I forget the first people to use the term hard light, but I believe force field does come from The Nightland by William Hope Hodgson, which is a sci-fi horror novel from like 1911. Which also speculated on ideas called earth currents, which have since been so discredited they're not even used in sci-fi anymore. But there was this Victorian idea of how electricity could be conducted by the earth itself. And in his series, there's this kind of massive ziggurat, or it's not a series, it's in this book. There's like a massive ziggurat pyramid. The last vestiges of human culture live in a tower that is protected by what he called a force field. It's light that has sort of been hardened, or it's like energy that has been drawn, in his case, from the earth, and formed into a sort of transparent shell to keep the monsters from killing all the people in the tower. So I think we know what force fields are just from having seen this so much in media. They work differently. In some it'll burn you, or in some it's just going to repel people, or in some it might dissolve you as soon as you touch it. So you can make your own rules there, but we kind of know the basics. Usually they're red for whatever reason. What else? First contact. What's first contact mean?
The first time two species have spoken to each other, usually separated by many light years of space.
Yeah, spoken to, or, I mean, it's usually tough for them to speak to each other so that they have realized that the other one is there and seen evidence that the other one has existed, or perhaps even physically encountered each other in some kind of way, gotten in touch with another species somehow. Often this is used, you said any species and you're right, but often this is used in reference to humans' first contact with aliens. So first contact is like a whole sort of sub-genre of sci-fi where, like, things like Arrival, or Independence Day, which is where it's going to be the first time any person runs into that species of alien, learns how they work, and maybe even, in the case of Arrival or something like that, acts as like an emissary between the humans and them. We have megastructures, which is going to be stuff like a Dyson sphere, or Anybody else have examples of megastructures?
Yeah, there's a series of novels called Bowl of Heaven, about I guess essentially some of the dinosaurs escaped the extinction and created a kind of captured a star inside an asteroid that like allowed them to, travel around the Earth or travel around the galaxy and come back around.
Dinosaurs did that? Damn.
Yeah. It's actually really good. It's actually kind of hard sci-fi, and it's a little bit silly, but it was a collaboration by Larry Niven, who wrote Ringworld, and what's his name, Gregory Benson, who wrote like so many like super hard sci-fi books. So
cool.
It's really interesting series.
Awesome. Yeah, I never would have thought dinosaurs would be capable of such feats of technology, but I'm sure that it makes sense in the book. But yeah, you mentioned Ringworld as well. A Ringworld is another example of megastructure. It's a structure bigger than anything we could possibly make today. Sometimes they're so big that they would only be able to be made in space. So a Dyson sphere, which is what you were sort of just talking about, is a theoretical megastructure that is built all around a star. So imagine like a solar panel that is built in a sphere around a star so that it captures all of the energy output of that star, so that you would be able to theoretically create massive amounts of energy and, power your whole empire or whatever from Dyson spheres. Other types of, we talked about the ring world, which is like a theoretical type of structure that would be, we see it in Interstellar or Halo or something like that, which is like basically a big space station that is formed on the foundation of this kind of a wheel that creates its own artificial gravity by rotating. You can see it in the background of the image here. I think you guys get the idea. Megastructure, really big building or vehicle. Post-apocalyptic, I think we all know that term. This means after it takes place in an era or a time of destruction of society. Dying Earth would be, I believe that is based, we get that from the Jack Vance Dying Earth books from the 70s, but that is specifically referencing the idea of it's a world that has been polluted in some way, or it's in the process of dying from nuclear war or energy weapons or dissolution of the atmosphere or something like that. Psionics. Anyone want to take this one?
I think at some level it is just space magic. Like in Warhammer 40k in the game, they literally just replaced the fantasy magic phase with the 40k psychic phase, so it's actually the same at a mechanical level. But more or less, it is the use of the brain to manifest your will into the world.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't have to be in space. It could just be people on Earth. But this is sort of just sci-fi magic. Like the Force is technically, now that they have explained it as much as they have, a type of psionics, because it's sort of saying there's these microbes in your brain that allow, or I don't even know how midichlorians work, in your blood, something like that, where you have enough of these microbes and you can start to interact with the tangible energy of the universe somehow. It's like pretty much as soft as sci-fi gets, but you'll see this sort of thing all the time. You see it in Independence Day, in XCOM, in Star Wars. I think Star Trek has some psychic stuff, though I could be wrong on that. But a lot of Firefly has psychics. You'll see this a lot in sci-fi, but you should just understand that there's not really any actual grounding principles for it. It's sort of, you just make it up as you go. Just be as consistent as you can with how your space psychics and magics are going to work. We have just a couple other things on here. I'll go through them quickly. Utopia versus dystopia. I think we know this one. So the dystopia is going to be a society that's gone to absolute crap because of oppressive government forces or regimes or whatever ruling structure is in place. And utopia is one that is, we sort of imagine a perfect or a more perfect version of society. Utopian fiction is not really a genre in the same way as dystopian fiction, simply because utopian fiction does not imply a conflict. If we say it's about some kind of perfect society, then it doesn't have that built-in conflict of, oh, the bad people are the government and we need to fight them or take them down. Utopian fiction might be about a sort of subversion, like it might be about a society that sort of seems perfect on its face, something like Logan's Run. that needs to, in fact, be revealed or shown to be a dystopia by the main characters, or it might be about some other story that's just set in some kind of perfect sci-fi world, but that's just tricky to pull off. So do with that what you will, but that spectrum of utopia to dystopia is something that is very, very, very much a big part of sci-fi. And then we have the singularity. Anyone want to define this one?
There are kind of two uses of the term, right? One is like the maybe a little more common, where AI reaches the point where it's close to human. Like a general AI can improve itself, and once it reaches a certain point, it's considered like, okay, this is this singularity. After this point, an AI will then continue improving itself so quickly that it will soon, like massively more intelligent than any humans, and like essentially could, depending on how it's designed, could wipe out humanity or do something crazy, because it's going to be like almost like a god or something, right?
Yeah, usually we
also
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to mention also, it's kind of sometimes used just in terms of like describing black holes, or like the event horizon of a black hole.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure about the astronomical use of it. But yeah, in terms of AI, which is the more common way we hear this, the singularity, like capital S, refers to that point in time, the theoretical point in time where AI will be as advanced as humans and develop its sort of idea of sentience, and will, if it usually it's considered to be that the benchmark or threshold of this will be when it can actually improve itself. You're right, because that's when it can exceed human intelligence and perhaps even subsume the whole galaxy or something like that. Often we have darker ideas about what is going to happen when the singularity actually occurs, but there's different authors have imagined this differently. Did we have a question?
Oh, I was just going to say, so singularity has nothing to do with the gravitation that causes like black holes and space-time to go like that.
Yep.
You wouldn't use, if you're talking sci-fi, you'd have to clarify how you're using singularity.
I'm not
Weren't
sure.
going to use it.
To be honest, maybe you should. Maybe it seems like Nacho knows a little more about that than me. I've only ever heard it in reference to this idea in robotics and artificial intelligence, but it might very well have its own astronomical uses.
Well, it is very. It's like a very common term in physics.
Okay.
Like the Big Bang was the singularity, so I think that's where they got it from, because it's the point of no return, like a culmination. So, anyways, that's good to know, though.
Right, yeah. So I think if capital S singularity is probably referencing this AI version, and not to mention in the chat, gravitational singularity was going to reference the physics version, I think. But I'm not smart enough to know these things, so you should ask someone else. Let's look at our last, what else do we have? Upload or transfer of consciousness. You can take your brain in some way and put it into a computer, or put it in someone else's brain, or just move it to some other housing. And last we have nanotech, which is very, very, very tiny robots, perhaps microscopic robots, perhaps big swarms of little tiny robots that can accomplish all kinds of tasks. Okay, so that's just like some of the terms that you should know. If you probably already know a lot of these if you are into sci-fi, because these kinds of concepts come up all the time, and you should know the kind of world and space that you are playing around in. These are all things that will lead us to the big idea. And so the big idea is the central speculative element of your story that sets your world apart from reality, because remember, if it's just stuff that can happen in reality, it's probably not sci-fi. But it's going to guide what your characters are doing and guide the topic and the sort of subject matter of your story. It's going to comprise the central element of the threat or obstacle, or the way your characters must overcome it, or a lot of the time both. So we're asking, what if this thing existed, or what if this technology advanced to this degree? Ultimately, the question is kind of, what conflict would this create or solve? So when you're writing out your loglines for today, we want to include the topic of scientific speculation, and also the big idea, sort of summed up very basically like this. So we have something like altered carbon. The topic of speculation is consciousness upload and posthumanism. The big idea is it's a world where there's these things called sleeves, which are like human bodies that you can transfer your consciousness into, so people have essentially achieved immortality. Minority Report, we mentioned earlier. The topic is criminal justice. And the big idea is pre-crime, which is a police agency that arrests criminals before they commit the crime. Ready Player One, the topic is social media and VR, and the big idea is Oasis, which is this worldwide metaverse that everybody uses and as something that is it's like Facebook meets VR chat times a billion. And then last we have Severance, which is the topic is corporate work life, and the big idea is the self-titled, the titular severance, which is a procedure to separate an employee's mind into two distinct halves, a work version and an outside version that have no memory of each other. So when you're writing out your loglines, include your topic of speculation and the big idea just summed up very simply. Often this can be just one word or a couple words. And with movies, you don't want to spread yourself too thin or include too many crazy concepts. You want to be able to boil down your big idea to kind of one thing. Do we have a question here?
Oh no, I just joined and I didn't press the mute button.
Oh, no problem. I heard something. Let me open it for questions regardless, though. Thanks for joining, by the way. Let's just open for questions on big ideas.
I guess this is kind of like a question about if you're writing a pilot, like there are shows that have like, some idea every week, right? Or some new thing. Would you say something like, I don't know, kind of like Stranger Things is sort of like one big idea per season or something? Or, I mean, it kind of feels like there's multiple things going on.
Right.
But feels cohesive in a way that something like Mystery of the Week doesn't, right?
Yeah, so the reason why is because those sort of different types of Thing of the Week come from the same source in Stranger Things. I think they do, don't they? The Upside Down is sort of this alternate dimension where all the monsters come from. All the events in the story have to do with the Upside Down. I'm pretty sure. I haven't actually watched past season 1. Go ahead.
In season 4, we find out that it all leads back to one thing. So yes.
Right. So that will definitely tie into my next slide here on just keeping things cohesive. The main way you're going to be doing this is in movies, at least in movies it's most important to do this. In TV, you should try to do this when you can. Obviously, sometimes you will see something more anthological like The X-Files where it's like, do they actually come from the same source? No. I think in one episode it's like a ghost, in one it's an alien, in one it's a mermaid or whatever. So in Monster of the Week TV, you do get a little more license to have a big idea of the episode or of the week or something like that. But when you can, to keep things more cohesive, you want to just try to pick one thing from which you can explore deeper or you can extrapolate further. So try to have your speculative elements share the same source. Or else when you start adding too many sources very quickly, it will start to enter this realm of, comic books wherein, like, think of Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man movie. Is that even sci-fi? No. A radioactive spider bites him, so it lets him shoot webs out of his hands and climb on walls and get really strong and move super fast and sort of take the properties of a spider. And at the same time, a super serum is being developed for soldiers that will fly on these kind of gliders and have this kind of hyper-plated armor. Did they look like goblins before he even designed the suit? I can't remember, but you can see, like, those are just two separate sources of two things happening at once. And Marvel movies. Does somebody have a question?
This is technically they changed it. In the comics, it's radioactive, but in the Sam Raimi films, I suppose, in the Marvel films, the spider that bit Peter Parker is genetically enhanced instead.
Okay. Well, but in real life, no matter how enhanced the spider was, it's not going to give you the ability to shoot webs or to do those crazy things. So. Thank you for the clarification, but you get the idea. It's not really based in scientific principles, and also, moreover, it's split. The movie has split tech, but that come from completely different sources, as many comic book movies do. So, go ahead.
What do you mean by source? If that's not a silly question.
Sure, that means like where is it coming from? So, for instance, imagine if.
Do you mean like inspiration?
No. Like, where in the world is that source or where in the world is that technology actually? Where are people getting access to it? So think, because Peter Parker is bitten by a radioactive spider. If Green Goblin was bitten by a radioactive goat and he turned into Goat Man, then it would be okay. The source of these is going to be radioactive animals. But since it's not, they don't have the same source. That's a super serum that was developed completely separately. It's not like the serum that also created the spider or something like that. So we're looking for things that come from the same in universe. They come from the same method or the same way of accessing that technology. Or if it had been like a radioactive spider bites 2 people, and one of them turns into the good Spider-Man, one turns into the bad Spider-Man, that would have been one way to do it. Something like that. But in terms of sources, you want to just make sure that whenever possible, you're not including a bunch of stuff. So you're like, okay, in this world, there's robots and also time travel. It's usually going to be better if it's like there's robots, so therefore there is time travel, like in Terminator. Or we have, Edge of Tomorrow, we have aliens and time travel in that one. Well, we combine those 2 sources by saying the alien queen has the biological ability to time travel that can then be biologically transferred to someone else through her blood. So they come from the same source. Or the Matrix. The Matrix has all kinds of crazy elements that all come from the same source. We have cyberpunk elements, we have superhero action, we have post-apocalyptic setting, we have space opera stuff, and advanced AI, all of which come from these machines that took over the planet and created this VR framework of the Matrix. Nothing feels like it comes from somewhere else. Ender's Game is another one where it has, we have alien invaders, and we also have a sort of orbital facility where we're going to be training child soldiers to be space warriors. Okay, so we say that orbital facility exists because of the aliens, and it's training soldiers specifically to fight them. Therefore, it doesn't feel like 2 separate things. Any questions on this?
What's the difference between The Edge of Tomorrow and how the alien queen has the innate biological ability to reset time, and how you stated that in Spider-Man, the spider, whether genetically enhanced or radioactive, affecting him biologically, how those don't appear to be the same the way you described it. So what's the difference there?
So in I think I perhaps didn't explain this 100% the way I meant to, because there's not a difference there. If we're saying in this world there is a creature that has some hyper technological ability, that is totally consistent and totally fine. And the only reason that in Spider-Man there was the inconsistency is because Green Goblin is not created by a genetically engineered spider. He's created by a serum that is developed by different people for something else. So the reason that Spider-Man is not coming from the same source is because there are 2 separate things happening in the world that come from, different people create these things. They exist for different reasons. It's 2 different types of new technology that are existing simultaneously rather than one of them existing because of the other. So I hope that makes sense. There's not any inconsistency with some a sci-fi creature having a biological magic adjacent ability.
I think there's also...
Sorry, let's do one at a time. Go ahead, Alien Boy.
I asked on the chat. I said on the chat that the Sam Raimi Spider-Man film, they do have some sci-fi elements, but they're sort of downplayed, wouldn't you think?
Yes, I mean they're very downplayed. In a lot of superhero stuff, we don't really explore exactly how the technology is working or why. It's not really about the implications of those technologies, and it's not really speculating anything particularly like where we're going in terms of that technology for the world or for humanity. So yeah, they're very, very downplayed.
So I think one important thing to consider is how you introduce your story and how your story is kind of known, including like the genre, the beginning, all that, will affect how far your audience will suspend disbelief. Because if you watch something like, I don't know, Adventure Time, you're going to be thinking very differently than watching maybe a World War II documentary.
Sure, yeah, that's very true. The beginning of your story almost always will set those expectations of what can the audience expect here and how they're going to use their suspension of disbelief. And as the story goes on, the audience's suspension of disbelief narrows so that they're less willing to accept other things as plausible and congruent. So that's why it's really important to set the sort of style and tone of what you're going for in the opening couple scenes. Like, why do you think The Matrix starts with this amazing action scene of Trinity being chased by agents through the city. We see like a preview of everything we're going to do later on in the movie. She's jumping between buildings. We're jumping off of walls and shooting guns and doing crazy kung fu. We do that to set the expectation for the audience. Oh, this is where this is going. This is what you can look forward to.
So, what if you aren't really trying to redefine the sci-fi genre by trying to come up with the most amazing source, and the source is not important to your story? You know what I mean?
It can
like if it's about characters who just so happen to live in this world that is super sci-fi and dealing with issues there.
You can do that. I mean, it might start to drift away from the principles of the sci-fi genre a little bit, and you might start to drift into something else. Like, if we're just using sci-fi as like scenery and setting, then maybe it's just like, I don't know, an action movie that happens to be set in a futuristic world. If we're not actually using that technology to explore any of these kind of core ideas of how the story is working, then it's starting to gravitate away from, if you so to speak, gravitate away from the basics of the sci-fi genre and the promises that includes. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it might just mean that you should look more to other genre expectations to make sure you're fulfilling those more. So if it's like primarily an action story, you should make sure, okay, this is going to be fulfill all the promises that action offers to the audience and downplay all the sci-fi as much as you want. There's no real rules as to how to do this. You're always just going to sort of decide, where you're falling on the spectrum between hard and soft science or hard and soft tech, and you're deciding how much you're going to stick to those rules and how much you're going to make your own rules. Good questions from everyone, though. Let's keep going for now. Feel free to leave more questions in the chat just because I want to make sure that we're getting to a lot of critical thinking time. So this is our big list of topics. I've arranged this in what I believe to be kind of more or less the descending order of how explored these ideas are. So at the top, we see the things that we've seen the most, and at the bottom, maybe we see the things that we have seen in movies and TV specifically, the least. This is not a definitive version of that, and I could have that wrong, but, we can look at aliens as maybe being up at the top. Things like aliens, AI, time travel, dystopia are going to be like those things that, at least nowadays, we have seen done in a billion ways. It's not that you can't do those things, because those things will always be in the consciousness of readers and humans in modern day. So you can still use these things, and just because something is more explored doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means that you have to find a slightly more creative angle to it. So we have things like alternate dimensions, dimensional travel, space travel or colonization, mutation, apocalypses, viruses or germs, VR and cyberspace, mind manipulation, uplifting, and the last one I have on here is I'm calling scientific divination, but maybe there's some other word for it, but this would be maybe scientific predestination, where we are sort of looking at, can science tell the future somehow, using maybe algorithms or something like that, like in the show Devs on FX, which is about, this technology that allows people to see what will happen, or this movie Knowing or Minority Report, things like that. So there's a big old list here, and I'm sure that we all have seen some versions of these things, and we have some ideas of how these things are working. So I don't want to draw way too much from this right now. I just want to sort of have these in your minds as we move ahead to our critical thinking phase, and we might go back to this slide in a few minutes just to make sure that we are I'm not sure. We may come back to this slide, but I want to move on for now. Let me just bookmark it, and we will move ahead to our main sort of discussion point for today. So exercise 1 is going to be on brainstorming and critical thinking, which we should just quickly define as the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. So we are going to use this chart here, which I might as well post in the chat as well, because it might be sort of hard to see in the resolution of our Discord window. But we're going to use some volunteers to go through this list of strange science headlines and get ready to just answer some of these questions about it. So if somebody wants to volunteer for this, let us know in the chat. We're not going to have time to go through every single question on here, but in later classes we will have time to do more of these. I'm just going to do 2 or 3 of them for now. Does anyone want to volunteer to do some critical thinking on science topics with us? Amanda? Okay, we'll have Amanda. Anyone else? Let us know in the chat, and I can call on you next. Let's start with Amanda. Amanda, can you see these headlines okay? Can you read these?
Yes. Texas man puts life saving into buying virtual property. Oh, life savings. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I can read them.
Okay, great. Let's read these out. So first one, we have Texas man puts life savings into buying virtual property. These are real headlines, by the way. So virtual property, kind of interesting. Researchers made cyborg locusts that can smell cancer. This is also real, I promise, although it doesn't sound real. There's a way of modifying insect brains to detect cancer. Not even a living insect. It's like a hollowed out shell of the insect that they're just like poking its brain, and they're able to use its sensory system somehow to detect diseases. We have AI-powered speech recognition entering a new phase, total global comprehension. Not exactly sure what that even means yet, but we can see how, speech recognition technologies have gotten incredibly advanced over the years, and all kinds of scary implications from that. I like this one here. Can you read this one in the bottom left, Amanda?
I saw that in the prompt. Google's allegedly sentient artificial intelligence has hired an attorney.
That just sounds like a comedy.
Right, but is it also almost like not singularity, but could be leading to dystopian really quickly or something?
Yeah, that's usually how people imagine those things going. Last ones we have shape-shifting microbots can brush and floss teeth. So imagine shoving a bunch of tiny robots in your mouth to clean your teeth, and welcome to the future. Yeah. I have a couple more, but let's just pick from these for now. Which one of these do you want to think about?
Let's do the attorney one, I guess.
The attorney. Okay, and let's pick a question. Can you read these?
No, that one's too easy. Well, okay, that's okay. No, we'll do that one.
Okay, let's do it. So do you want to do who, what, when, where, why, or how?
What is fine. What is good.
Okay, let's look at what. So I'm gonna bring it out of the slideshow just so I can zoom in a little bit, and maybe that'll make it easier to read. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. Okay, so the topic in question here is an advanced AI asking for an attorney. So we might define that as like sort of approaching the singularity. We have AI asking. Let's make this AI rights. So AI quote human rights will be the topic that we're talking about. Okay. So what are the strengths and weaknesses would be our first question. And so I'm not sure if well, let's ask more what are the advantages and disadvantages rather than strengths and weaknesses. So what is to be gained or what is to be lost by giving robots the same legal representation rights as humans?
Oh, I was gonna. So my first thought was the strength of the idea is that you can map the AI from humans, right? Because AI is designed by humans, so you can do parallels without plot holes there, kind of.
Okay.
And then the weakness is just that, at this point we could shut it down, just turn it off. Like it would be hard for me to suspend disbelief, like that the AI somehow is, if we didn't want to give it an attorney, we could just shut it off. But that's
sure.
So, the premise. So,
right. Okay. So yeah, and let's think in in real life terms, we could just shut it off. I'm sure some people would start to question the ethics of that on its face. But let's just debate this. Let's just talk about this idea of AI rights or AI legal rights.
Okay.
So let's look at advantages and disadvantages. What are the advantages of giving these rights to artificial intelligence?
I mean, if we treat artificial intelligence more as human, it's less likely to revolt. So if we treat AI like slaves, there's a much greater chance of them coming back and annihilating us.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So it's if they have a sense of compassion, then maybe they will treat us better because we treated them better. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Do we need to pay robots to work for us? Because, I mean, it needs to get money to pay for an attorney, to pay taxes and all that. If we're making it equal to human, they'd also have to do those certain human things.
That's a good
right?
Let's
Yeah.
so just for the purposes of this exercise, let's just keep it to the one speaker at a time. But if you want to volunteer next, then feel free to do so, and you can do the
Oh,
next
okay.
one.
Sorry.
Or write in the
but
comments
You're right.
too, because
Yeah, feel free to use the comments as well. But that's a good point. I mean, like if we're saying an AI needs to be able to hire an attorney, then if we follow that syllogism down the logical path, we say, well, they legally can't have jobs. So how would an AI get money, for instance? That might be like a counter argument against it. You might even be able to use that to say, well, an AI is not going to be able to afford an attorney, and what are we going to do? Pay the robot? So give the robot money? So we might. That just some interesting ideas and questions there. How about this? Is there another alternative?
from the AI needing an attorney. Like so the situation had to have been that the algorithm of the intelligence is requiring some sort of contract to be written up for itself in order to do something else. So it's hit something where it needs a contract, or so. I mean, the alternative is that you just program a contract into it. You just like we manufactured the AI, we just manufacture a contract for the AI in a computer program.
Sure. Okay. So like actual contracts that designate what the robot is allowed to do, or maybe we need new rules in place if the robot feels that its rights were violated. Maybe we need new protections in place. That would
built into the code.
Yeah, perhaps built into the code, or perhaps built into the law that might say you can't treat your robot like this, something like that. Maybe that would satisfy the robot who wants an attorney. Let's pick one more question. So, what's the pick one of these? Best or worst case scenario? Most or least important part of this? Let's do best and worst case. I like that one.
Yeah, I like that one. I mean, worst case scenario is that the AI, I don't know, it makes Bitcoin or something. And some greedy lawyer, is just like, well, he's going to pay me. So shit, I'll represent him, and creates, these new laws for artificial intelligence that, gives them human rights in a way that undermines like ours in some way, like that doesn't take into account the fact that like we've programmed them and there's just something different about that. And not to mention, this is what pisses me off about this whole scenario is that animals do not have human rights yet, and I will, over my dead body, does artificial intelligence get human rights before animals?
Okay.
So
that's
a very
interesting. Maybe some interesting points of view for a movie there. And so if that's the worst case scenario, you're sort of saying that people might exploit the AI in some kind of way. Like if we realize that AI are actually paying money to lawyers, then maybe somebody will like design a framework around that where they can
make a lot of money, because suddenly it's a great
sure, okay,
right, it's a great way to make it's an untapped market.
right. I also might say, just the worst case, if we're saying the scenario occurs of robot or AI needs to hire an attorney, the scenario could always be they hire an attorney, the attorney gets them off, and they were guilty, or they didn't, they should have lost, but the attorney has now absolved this AI of whatever.
Right. And the AI is just going to be more intelligent than the humans at a certain point, because it's processing a lot more things at a conscious level. Mm-hmm. And so and then also actually the worst case scenario is like, why is the AI hiring an attorney, right? So then there could be something dark behind that too.
Sure. And last question, what's the best case scenario?
The best case scenario is that the fact that the thought process that goes behind, whether we give robots rights leads to animal rights and the stopping of factory farming.
Okay, sure. That's a very specific take on this, but that's okay. You can answer these questions however you want, and these are all things that might come up.
What would your best case? I know that's my own. I twisted it to my own
That's okay.
design.
what would I think? What's the best case scenario here? That we hire the robot hires an attorney. It turns out that the attorney gets the robot out of whatever trouble it was in, and as a result, that AI is now so pleased with humanity or whatever that it acts as a sort of emissary between us and robot kind, and it helps us design laws that are going to treat everyone fairly.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very good. Thank you. That was
Sorry, just making it up. Good thoughts, though. Thank you for doing this. Let's do one more. And so, like, as we're doing these should just be jogging your juice. Jogging your juice? What am I saying? Juices flowing, gears turning, whatever it is. That should help you start to, like, these questions should help you start to be able to take these topics and ask, where could this go that we have not seen explored before? Where are some places that we could take this that might illuminate some new element of human nature that we haven't seen fully explored before? Or what's some technology we've never seen in a movie before, or we've never seen it used for this before? So just this is to help you think of ideas. Let's get one more volunteer.
I'll give it a go.
All right, let's do it. Let's pick a topic from the... Where were my slides? Am I on the right thing? Yes, I am. Okay, it's on this page here. So, what we have left, we have Texas man puts life savings into virtual property, total global speech comprehension, shape-shifting microbots in your teeth, and we have cyborg locusts that can smell cancer. I also have 2 on here. Democratic AI is better at redistributing wealth in America, and a woman with an artificial heart in her backpack that she carries around everywhere she goes. This is also real. So artificial organs being carried around on your person in some kind of portable device or machine. Anything catch your interest?
I think, what was that other one from Google? The one on the second page? Yes, the AI at redistributing wealth.
Government AI, yeah. Do you want to do that one?
Let's go with that.
Okay. Let's pick who, where, when, why, or how.
Let's see. Can you resize that up? Sorry, I can't see into bits. Let's go with what did the person before me use?
What? So we'll pick who, where, when,
Okay,
why, or how.
something else. Let's go with why.
Why? Okay. Let's zoom in on why. So the topic is government AI, as in we could. Sorry, I messed up the slide. Could we have an AI actually run the government for us? Is this? Oh wait, where is it? Why is this a problem or challenge?
Because of the word government.
Okay, can you explain?
I mean, usually anything that touches government becomes corrupt by some. Well, I don't know the science behind that. This is almost like it's almost beyond. Well, I guess it's power. Power corrupts, and government is full of power.
Okay, so you might say that any government is going to not make everyone happy just due to the fact that governments are trying to run things efficiently and are trying to, consolidate power for themselves, and an AI might not be the best at that. Is that the problem?
No, I'm saying that somehow the AI let's figure out how intelligent is this AI.
I'm not sure. So we just have. You can feel free to look up these actual headlines if you want to, but I kept it to just the headline for now because we should just talk about the topic in general. So whatever.
Assuming the AI becomes intelligent enough to learn, then it will learn how government works, and learn that government can be corruptible and used to manipulate people, and therefore it will come up with ways to redistribute its wealth and use calculations that the human mind can't do to give itself or whoever it likes more wealth than others.
Okay, so it might treat people unfairly and therefore not be good for governing. That's a good point. Let's ask this question. Why is there a need for this? Why might this actually be good?
Well, assuming that the benevolent nature of it is actually upkept, the ability for other people to have a chance to earn or get or live probably help solve homelessness to a degree. Issues like that.
Okay, you think you think there are problems that it could solve that humans can't?
Yes, assuming it doesn't have human. Yes, because machines don't often have human want or human desire. Human machines tend not to have that. What is it? Part of their brains that need that dopamine fix. That needs to give them constant thrills, or they'll be bored off their ass.
Right. So
if I'm making sense.
Sure. So
I'm saying that it doesn't need to be entertained.
Okay, so AI doesn't have some of the flaws that humans might have. I mean, you could say
Right. Or
AI,
sleep.
If we assume the AI is working as intended, so as a completely fair arbiter, we're assuming there's not sinister people in charge of it, then theoretically it could use mathematical skills that humans would require vast amounts of staff and personnel and spreadsheets and everything just to come up with the conclusions of, like, where should we draw the state lines, where should we determine where should the industry go. Like, an AI can look at algorithms and calculate, like, mass amounts of data and synthesize answers very quickly that people can never do, right?
Correct.
So I would say there's, that's why this why question is important. I think, why is there a need for this, and also why could this go wrong? That you're going to find really interesting story seeds in just those questions alone. Let's do a couple more. Let's just do like two more questions. Why have we allowed this to happen? Okay, let's ask the question: why would this be allowed to happen? Like, what scenario would lead to AI taking over the government or being instituted as the main governing force?
Well, I mean, there could be all sorts of things. It could be that people are tired of the old guard and rebellion, and no human can be trusted with this corruptible position that leads to potential absolute power.
Okay, so some sort
So
of...
let it be from a machine that has no form of human bias and human selfishness.
Okay, so you're saying this might happen as the result of a revolution?
Probably.
Okay, I could see that. Maybe even a revolutionary group insists that its AI is going to be a better leader than the whoever's currently in charge, and now they're basically taking over with the express intent of installing their AI as... Maybe you think of competing groups that each one has their own AI. There's like 5 different rebel factions that each have developed their own virtual leader, and they're all trying to fight for control and supremacy. That'd be cool. That's a story someone should do. What are some other reasons? Is there a reason why this might be allowed to happen that's not the result of a crisis?
Usually, the way... Well, I would say that science is... what's that quote about science is from necessity? That quote,
So you're thinking that it's unlikely...
necessity of the mother of invention.
Mm-hmm. So you think it's unlikely that people would give control to an AI? Oh, they would take control away from themselves and give it to an AI? You think it's unlikely that...
It will give them more free time to not have to think, to shut off their brains, and to let those life and not have to do too many things and be lazy.
Sure, like in WALL-E. All the people in the...
Pretty much.
In their pods or their chairs or whatever.
So I could just see people saying, I'm bored of having to... I want more free time. Mm-hmm. Develop this thing. That's what a lot of inventions are coming down to these days.
We just want to do less work.
Or it could just be some government psyop anyway. I don't know.
All right. Great answers here. Yeah, there's... we can see... I can already start to see different scenarios that might explore the positive elements and also these questions of, should AI be in charge of governing people? And the process of getting there might be just as interesting as the implications of once it actually occurs. So it's nice to think of, like, what might cause this to happen. Might it be a crisis, or might it be a society advancing to the point where they're like, oh, our consensus is that this would be better. So they voluntarily give control to the machines. That would take a lot to happen, I feel. Probably cause lots of conflict amongst that society as well. So thank you for those answers. Thank you for participating. Some great brainstorming and critical thinking here. I will be doing more of these in the following weeks in our other sessions. I want to make sure that I'm leaving enough time for student loglines for today, though. So let's move on to that now, and let's look at some of the basics of, we're not going to have time for activity 2. But so if you've been in other script camp classes, you know the basics of what a logline is. This is that one-sentence expression of your idea that is going to boil down the essentials of who is the main character, what is the catalyst that shakes up their normal world, what are they trying to accomplish, what is in their way. Those are the essential facts we need to answer with this one sentence. So there's kind of a template we can use for this that looks like this. When or after inciting incident, an adjective protagonist must conflict before stakes, or else stakes, or maybe ticking clock. So that's going to be inciting incident is the event that kicks the story in motion, and that it's the first domino that tips over that is going to lead to the rest of the events in the story happening. So it should make sure the first thing causes the next thing. An adjective protagonist, you're picking an adjective that is describing them as they are at the beginning, or maybe in a way that you're highlighting something they're going to be struggling with, or some tactic they're going to be using, or something that is just going to be especially germane and pertinent to them in this story. So pick that adjective carefully. Protagonist, you can use whatever you want. A job is a good place to start, so you might say, I don't know, a paranoid milkman might be like one of these things here, but you can define somebody in a couple different ways. If it's less important that he's a milkman and more important that he's a widower, then you might describe him as a paranoid widower. See what I mean? So you can use whichever word you want to refer to your character, but try to do it in such a way that it highlights the connection to what's going on here and their investment in the story. They have to conflict. That's going to be the obstacle that's in their way and the way that they're going to try to overcome it before or in order to stakes. That's the bad thing that's going to happen if they don't. Or ticking clock might be some fuse that is, hissing down so that by the time it finally burns up, something bad will occur. So, if you already have some ideas of what to do there, then you can start posting loglines now. If you posted one before and I missed it, you might just have to repost it so that it's at the bottom in the same place as all the others. But we do want to take a look at these and give feedback on them so that by next week you have a much clearer picture of the sci-fi movie that you want to write. So, what are you guys thinking? Post your loglines or whatever you have of your logline into the chat, and we'll be glad to take a look and mark it up. Feel free to do that now, and I will get a document ready here so that I can write on them. Not sure why that's not coming up. All right, here we go. I'm ready. Do we have some loglines? Monica has... Is this a logline? U571 plus alien. Are those comps, or is that the title, or what is that?
That's what I have called it, but I don't have a title for it. I guess comps is really what it is.
Okay, sounds good. So untitled sci-fi submarine movie, I guess, or starship. It looks like. Okay.
It's a spaceship.
All right. So is this an action film? Yeah, or adventure? Yeah, I guess it is. It sounds like action. Untitled sci-fi action. All right, go ahead and read this out for us.
Sure. The crew of a crippled starship is hunted by space-dwelling predators. The crew must repair their ship, brave the vacuum of space, or perish.
All right, thanks for that. So, repair their ship, brave the vacuum of space, or perish. Meaning that a crippled starship means it's adrift in space?
Yes, I'm assuming the first scene is they are doing just fine driving through space, then they are hit by a laser beam or an asteroid or one of these creatures, and now they're in trouble.
Okay, so when you say crippled starship, though, that could mean to me that it's on an orbital, it's on a planet, it's on an asteroid, it's crashed into the ground somewhere, it's crashed into a space station, it's on a space station. So I think if we're saying they're adrift in space, that is implying its own whole set of games and interesting things we can do in the movie. So I would just clarify a little bit what you mean by the setting of this. We're on a spaceship that has no power, that is, hurtling through the void or whatever. And they're hunted by space-dwelling predators. How intelligent?
The original pitch for Alien was Jaws in space, and I did not think they exactly did that. So in my mind, it was Jaws in space when I started thinking about this. So I'm thinking sort of shark-like, all it knows is eating kind of thing.
Okay, and you mean like a lot of these things, or just a couple of them? You just kind of left the antagonist kind of not that defined, which, when we've seen so many movies about people being hunted by monsters in space, we just want to usually know a little more or be a little more specific so that we know, like, is this a space-dwelling predator that can shapeshift? You know what I mean? Like, is this a space-dwelling predator that can use technology? Can it possess people? Like, what it can act... We want to know what the actual... Because in stories like this actually sounds a little more like adventure horror to me, actually, now that you have described it. It doesn't sound much like action if we're fighting against animals, basically. But this is going to be like adventure with a horror-ish vibe. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I was probably thinking more horror because that's the world my brain lives in. But I think they are going to shoot it with ray guns. They're not just going to run away. So if that makes it more of an action, then that's sort of where it is.
Right. Okay. So I would just clarify / specify antagonist a little bit more, because in horror the hook is the threat. And if we don't know what this is besides, oh, aliens are after him, then we might not excite the viewers of this type of media as much. We want to know, is this going to be a tentacle monster that can swim through space? Is this going to be a shape-shifting serpent creature that can imitate people's voices? You know what I mean? Just find what are the specific games that the type of alien that you're choosing have provided us.
All right. Originally, it was a school of space-dwelling predators, like a school of fish. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that I'm still going with this sort of, fishy vision of what they are. But I thought that a school didn't sound quite right, because a school of fish works under the sea, but a school of things in space could be like, an actual academy. So I changed it to a flock of space-dwelling predators, and then it looked too long, and I just deleted that. So should that qualifier go back in?
I'm thinking swarm might be the word you want.
Yeah. That's probably correct. A swarm of space-dwelling, carnivorous worms, but that's 2 words. I want like 1 word that means face on a string.
Okay, you'll get there. Parasites? I mean, like...
Yeah. Well, but parasites has a complete and total different implication. Like, I think like slithers, like Cronenberg, something that wants to live inside you. Anyway, I'll work on that.
It can also be something like a lamprey that attaches to the outside of a whale, or like a star. Like, remember the Vinox in Star Wars Empire Strikes Back? Like those little guys. So yeah, I'm sure you'll think of it. But the point is, with horror especially, the exact mechanics and the hook of the movie is going to be, how is the monster working? What kinds of games does it suggest to us, given its abilities and just what it's capable of?
Talking to you now, maybe the monster doesn't even primarily want to eat them. Maybe it wants to eat the ship. That's why it keeps attacking them. That's why the ship is crippled. It's trying to get onto the ship and suck all of the power out, and they're going to die as a result of this thing.
That's a good idea.
And of course,
Go ahead.
No, and if they attack it, it will obviously defend itself. It will tear them apart if they try to get it off the ship, because that's what an animal would do. But it doesn't have particular interest in killing them.
Right. Also, I mean, the only real way that carnivorous space-dwelling creatures could exist is if there are enough other space-dwelling carnivorous creatures for them to sustain themselves on... Like, is there enough biological matter in space for them to eat and actually survive? Which means that you're going to have to design an entire space ecology of the animals that live out there for it to potentially eat. If it's eating inorganic stuff like the metal of the ship, or maybe it wants the oxygen, or maybe there's some fluids in their life support system that it wants to eat, or something like that, you might create a creature that makes a little more sense, or perhaps to us makes a little bit less sense, because we're not used to animals that can consume inorganic stuff, but it might just work for this story, and it presents just a slightly different set of stakes.
Yeah, think about it in a Darwinist sense, which I never have. Like, why on Earth would a clump of cells, or in space rather, would a clump of cells evolve to eat meat in space, or anything else? What would you evolve to eat in space?
Yeah.
And thank you very much. You've given me some really cool questions to parse on. I've had this one in my mind and on my logline sheet for several years now, and I've never done anything with it. So this is good encouragement to push forward. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you for the logline. This sounds cool. Let's do some more. Yep. So we are sharing sci-fi loglines to answer the question from Azerty. So we have 15-20 minutes, so I'll get to as many as I can. Looks like we have 3 that are posted. If we don't get to yours this week, then make sure to sign up for next time. This class runs for 4 more sessions after this. Let's do Carmen. Do we have a title and do we have any more info for this one? Is this an obsessive? This is a logline, right? Yes.
Yeah, I don't have a title yet, though, Connor.
That's okay.
But I can think of one.
You can wait on it. We can just call it Untitled for now. Why don't you read out what you have?
Okay. An obsessive-compulsive librarian discovers a book with optical cerebral translation properties and must travel to the exact nanosecond of time to facilitate her return to the love of her life. Something like that.
Okay. Thanks for that. So she discovers a book. So what would you say is the subgenre of this? Is this kind of like a romantic drama or something like that? Or what exactly is this?
The subgenre?
Mm-hmm. So for the stakes are, she's trying to get back to the love of her life. My guess would be that romance would be in there somewhere, but maybe not. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah. So I think it's I don't know. I have to think about it.
Okay. Well, that'll be important, so make sure to try to nail down what this genre is, because that's going to tell us like what we're sort of doing in the story. Like, how is she actually trying to solve this problem? Because I'm just having trouble sort of seeing the movie a little bit. Let's go through the basics of this. An obsessive-compulsive librarian discovers a book with optical cerebral translation properties. What does that mean?
Okay, so she opens the book, and the book has some very key moments of history. Okay, life chain of this history. It takes you into the moments of that history through translation.
I don't understand.
It's an optical, like,
It's a history book?
how they read. It's kind of like a history book, but it has the technological ability to translate you into the time that you're reading about in that moment.
Oh,
So
okay.
then every episode would be,
Oh, it's a TV show.
Oh yeah, it's a pilot. It's a pilot.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, so it's not really a book in that case. It's more of a VR computer shaped like a book?
What's a VR computer?
Virtual reality?
They have those?
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of virtual reality stuff, and mostly based on heads. Like, have you seen those headsets like the Oculus?
Oh yeah, I've used one of those before.
Right, that's VR.
And I rode on a roller coaster. That was so cool. It felt really real.
So it's
okay,
like,
that's
it's
virtual.
Like that. It's like beaming the experience into your brain, kind of thing.
Yes, like that, exactly.
Okay, so I just want to clarify the tech here. And then he must travel to the exact nanosecond in time. Is your character time traveling?
She's going to have to time travel. Could be he or she. In order to change the course of these events. And the entire goal is to arrive at a world that is that's not being, transformed into this futuristic robot, type of. She wants to put a stop to that, the whole robot world that's emerging, before her very eyes. So she's using the technology. Oh, you don't.
I'm just not clear on what. So sorry, you're saying she's trying to change the whole world
Through these historical events.
How does
that
flashing
are
back to
in.
historical events change the world?
She has to do certain things inside those worlds to change the history and therefore change the outcome. So every episode is different, of course, you know.
So this isn't really sci-fi if you're saying she finds a book that makes her go back. This feels like we have too many things going on and too many sources of fantasy. I'm not seeing, or too many sources of. This is what I was talking about before. We have a book that zaps VR images into your brain to help to let you recreate historical scenarios, and we also have a lady who needs to time travel. I think that you're saying she's somehow time traveling through this book, but it doesn't even feel like a book at all to me anymore, the way it's described. I'm kind of lost as to what we're doing here and how this is actually functioning. I would try to just like combine this as much as possible, like streamline this and just clarify what exactly is going on here. Maybe you just look into how you're describing what it is that she's found. So it's not really a book, it's more of a device or machine or time machine. It's more of a time machine, really, than anything else, isn't it? Or like, so just think of how you're explaining this.
Could this be almost fantasy? I just want to jump in and just, could this be fantasy if it was a book?
Good question. Go ahead.
Well, because I thought a time machine would be, isn't that the normal thing that's used to travel through time? Time machines?
It is. Usually it's not a book, though. Usually a time
So
machine
this
is
is
like a pod you get in, or like a big, like a chair that you sit on with a lever that you pull or something like that. So I guess the question was, would this work if it was a magic book she found, as opposed to some scientific explanation for what's going on?
Right. And I did picture the little boy with the flying monster movie, The Never-Ending Story. He goes into the book.
Right.
Remember that?
Oh,
Except on this one, it's the cerebral, optical cerebral translation is a thing, as opposed to just kind of you're being translated to.
But if it's just doing something in your brain, there's no way that your main character would actually be able to change the past.
Yeah, I was working on that part.
Right, so it just
like
feels like
trying
there's
to
a couple
work
different.
that part out.
Yeah, you got to kind of streamline and combine things a little bit here, because right now it feels like we have sort of two different main sources of your hyperscience or tech going on. This feels like it would, to me. I agree with the commenter. This probably would, in its current form, work better as a fantasy story where woman finds history book. You can go back to previous eras in the history book and change things to arrange it so you get back to the love of your life. It's sort of like the butterfly effect. So that's my current thought. I'm like, how could this possibly even make any sense in a scientific way? But maybe it's just that you need to do some more thinking on the tech of this and make sure it's as streamlined and simple as possible, and everything's sort of coming from the same source.
Okay, I'll think it over. I'll have to watch the video after you guys post it.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
It should be up right away on YouTube. Thanks, Carmen.
Great. Thank you.
All right, we have time for. So we'll cut off the logline posting at the moment, and I'll get to all the ones that are here. But if you have more, you can enroll in the class. Look in the chat right now, and you'll see a little poll. You can click those blue numbers that Natra just posted. And if you're planning on signing up, you can click the little 1, and you can get instant access to all of our private chat channels and recording library. If you are not signing up or are not sure or have questions, you can also just click those little buttons there. Let's I might just stay a couple minutes over because it looks like do we have 2 left? No, we have 3 left. I'll go pretty quickly through these. If we get to the end of the class and you are still wanting more, make sure to just sign up. Okay, let's look at Space Dogs. Are you here, Biton?
I am.
You are. Okay, great. Can you read this out for us?
Sure. The Space Dogs. Genre, dystopia, war, action. Following a government leak that disgraces the government, a fledgling pilot must restore his father's squad of star pilots to stop a galactic war that he himself supported and trained to fight in.
All right, thanks for that. So, a pilot needs to restore his father's squad of pilots to stop a galactic war that he supported and trained to fight in. Has the war already started, or has it not?
It's kind of starting. There's always been threats of the two planets going to war.
So my question is, if this is going to be sort of a build the team military type story, if you're saying the war hasn't started yet, how is a squad of fighter pilots going to stop a war?
Oh, because the whole rebuilding thing is the fact that the pilot squad is destroyed or is set up to fail, and that is supposedly used as an excuse to catalyze the war.
Okay, maybe I'll frame the question like this: what is their objective? What are they? If they accomplish what, will they stop the war?
Well, I'm not sure how to put it into words, but if they stop the enemy, the question is, which government is actually the enemy? That's what I'm trying to allude to, without outright spoiling that both sides are actually playing into each other for a proxy war type money laundering scheme and weapons manufacturing scheme.
So I'm still not totally clear what we're actually doing in the movie. If you're saying hostilities have not yet started, then what is a squad of fighter pilots going to actually do? Do they have to destroy a certain enemy? How do we just clarify what are they trying to accomplish? Is there like a villain?
There is a villain, but the thing is, the villain every season or every episode, you think, is this the true villain? Is there somebody bigger than that?
Okay, it's a TV show. Okay, so this is a pilot.
Yes.
Okay, did not know that. So that does change things a little bit. It would seem to me that clarifying the villain will help us understand what we're doing in the show, because if you tell us it's an action war series, but we don't understand who's fighting who, or who the main characters are against, or why, then it will start to seem more like a political show. And is that what you kind of meant here? Is this going to be mostly about...
It is a little bit political.
Oh, it is? Okay.
I mean, every show's... then again, I've come to learn that everything is. We were talking about... we're talking about how everything uses allegory. Sci-fi can be blatant about it, right?
I guess my question is, are your characters going to be more like sitting in boardrooms and giving speeches and press conferences, or are they going to be...
No, they're going to be out on the field, but they're going to be learning pretty quickly that they're being used as... They're going to be learning at some point that they've been used as pawns for their planet's military-industrial complex, and that they're disposable. They're not heroes that they're being propped up to be.
So it sounds to me like it's not really they're trying to stop a war, they're trying to win a war. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay, I would use that.
But towards the end, they're like, this war is stupid, and both of you guys are playing us like fiddles so you can rally up the people in a lie.
Okay. I see a little more what you're talking about now. If we're trying to win a war, I get that they're accomplishing strategic objectives. Every episode, they're going to have some military target. I think you're saying this is kind of like Gundam or something like that.
Yeah, kind of. Like a planet of the week or location of the week that we do dogfights on.
Okay, gotcha. So to that end, I think you will just need to, if this is more of an action-focused story, clarify who is that villain, or who are we fighting against. If it's going to be, is it a dictatorial faction of space slavers, or is it an alien race of brain-eating slugs, or like just tell us who your main characters are.
Well, it's just people against people, except
Right, but people can be class. I mean, we could say it's a faction of space terrorists, or we could say it's a faction of planetary terraformers, or we could say it's there's a lot of ways you can describe who we're going up against. Is it people that have giant robots? Is it a faction?
Should I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Should I be? Should I mention the twist villain in the log line, where it's like this whole time the great general who the protagonist looks up to because he loves his country and his military, and he's like all the troops, hail the troops, and this guy is like, you're all expendable and you're making me big bucks.
For a TV show, I don't think you have room for that.
So don't mention the twist villain yet.
No, don't worry about twists. We just need the broader overview here. The last thing is that I'll just say the first clause to me does not seem to lead to the rest of this. Following a government leak that disgraces the government. First of all, we'd like to avoid having the same word repeated twice, so if you can avoid the word government twice, maybe just say following a leak that disgraces the government. Is that something that causes the rest of the story to happen?
Yes, because the government needs a big distraction from this fact that something awful happened.
And their distraction is what?
A new war.
Oh, the war
is the distraction
from a leak? Oh.
Yep.
Okay. I might think that that's sort of less important than what your characters are so I might your first clause might be something more like, when a galactic war threatens blank, like your main character's home system or whatever, he must restore his father's blah 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 and the rest of this. I think if we're just saying the leak is what eventually or is like the ultimate cause for this war, that's not as important for us as clarifying the stakes here. So probably use your first clause as like, when a galactic war threatens main character, like whatever your main character cares about, when it threatens his home world or his home system, or like why does he, for whatever reason that he cares. Then that's really what kicks the story off. The leak is sort of the catalyst of the catalyst. That's like saying, that's the thing that eventually causes this war to happen, and the war happening is what causes your main character to need to assemble this team and to become a great warrior pilot like his father. Try make sure that it seems like the first thing happening is logically leading to the next thing, and then the whole thing will just feel more cohesive.
All right.
Thank you for this. Great stuff here. Space Dogs. That's a cool title.
Well, because it's technically, inspirationally, I'm kind of leaning more towards an animation to more make it seem this is like everybody's like an animal type of person, and how cutesy, but wait, underneath everything is all horrible.
Okay, yeah, that's
and that's the part that a lot of people have told me, don't do that. Don't take inspirations from that sort.
Well, it's up to you. It's your pilot, so you can do it however you want. Thank you so much for volunteering. We're at our 2-hour mark, so I want to just say thank you for sticking around. I have just a couple more log lines to get through, though I'm not taking new submissions at the moment. So I want to just get to Alien Boy and Azerty, and then we will wrap for today. But thank you all for coming by. I just want to remind you, if you want to continue in the course, do sign up for Script Camp, which you can do at scriptcamp.net. We have a bunch of awesome stuff coming up. Let me just briefly show us the stuff that we have coming up, and then we will finish off these last log lines. So we have TV Pilot Bootcamp that is going into week 2 tomorrow, so it's not too late to join if you want to write a brand new TV pilot in just 6 weeks, or I don't know, 4 weeks at this point. This is the last week to join before I would say just wait for the next one. So that's tomorrow from 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock Pacific time. We have a bunch more of these sci-fi classes, as I mentioned, and we have Wednesday and Thursday classes at 5 o'clock Pacific. That's every week. We also have an interview with pro screenwriter Logan Martin, who wrote the horror script Meat, off the Blacklist. That is on August 9th at 5 o'clock. We have Writers Lab Saturdays at 4. We have groups that you can join now if you are interested in joining or starting a group. Just you can fill out our form and join our group for horror writers, animation writers, or comedy writers. We also have script swaps Tuesdays at 5, and we have readings on Sundays at 2. Here's the schedule of the upcoming classes. That interview is going to be on the 3rd of August, and our brand new class on crime genre is going to be end of August on the 25th. Okay, let's, let me pause for questions really quick on anything we've talked about or on Script Camp stuff, and then we'll go back to our last couple log lines. Any questions on Script Camp? Or on this program?
Would we have to attend next week? I'm not sure I can make. Yeah, this was like a 4-week thing you mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
every Saturday.
Yeah, there's 4 weeks after this. I mean, you can, if you sign up for the class, you can come to as many of them as you want. There's never a requirement.
Oh, it's not like one follows directly from another.
They do, but it's like a college class in that you can just drop in or drop out. You're not going to be like graded, or we're not taking attendance, or you're not like required to go to any specific class. But they do follow the logical steps of, logline, then outline, then expanded outline. So if you do follow it, you will get more out of it, but you don't have to come to any specific one. Any other questions? Okay, great. Let's do our last 2 log lines. We will start with Alien Boy for the Mother. Can you read this out for us?
The Mother, genre sci-fi thriller, logline. An ex-CIA agent helps a group of protesters to protect a pregnant artificial human from an overzealous government organization and a religious terrorist group.
All right, thanks for that. An ex-CIA agent helps a group of protesters protect a pregnant artificial human from an overzealous government organization and a religious terrorist group. Okay, so is it like illegal for robots to give birth in this world or something like that?
Basically, there's this group of scientists that were experimenting on creating artificial humans, and they thought, what if we made one that's able to get pregnant?
And now they want it. Why?
I guess just to see, just test, just for tests.
Just for tests?
Yeah, because like I said, they're creating these artificial humans.
Well, you say a religious terrorist group, so they must want it for more than just tests. They must have some kind of actual ideological opposition to what's going on here, right?
Yeah, because they think that these artificial humans are abominations, and they want to exterminate them.
Oh, okay. So it seems like you have split your antagonists between 2 different sets of forces. Is that right? The religious group is not working with the government?
No.
No, they're not. This is 2 separate factions.
Yeah, the government organization are just doing this because they want to keep their wipe their hands clean from, because they know they were involved in some of this, so they don't want this to get on their hands as well.
Okay. So you're probably going to be better off if, instead of just describing multiple factions that are going to be after this this robot or this artificial character, you instead focus in on a specific villain. So it's
okay.
It's instead of he's trying to protect a group of protesters, or help protect a artificial life form against these groups, he's saying, I need to protect it against this guy who's in charge of this terrorist group who wants to eradicate it for this personal reason. So just having that a little more personified in one individual will give us stronger emotional connection to what's going on here, and also it'll just hint at a central relationship or one of the central relationships for the movie. So I would say probably designate who your actual villain is, and pick, if it's going to be, who are the main villains here. If it's mainly the religious group, probably pick the leader of that. If it's mainly this government group, it's probably going to be the leader of that you mentioned. And you mentioned, that guy and his cronies are coming after this character. An ex-CIA agent, we don't have any actual description of main character, so pick your adjective carefully.
Because I was.
Go ahead.
I was thinking about like the leader of the religious group and how she's more and how this person is really more passionate to kill the artificial pregnant human. The leader of the religious terrorist group.
Okay, but
I was thinking about.
For your main character, I guess we should just be sure that we're picking a way to describe them that suggests why is this person the one going through this story. So is this if it's like a mother who lost her child and now she has to defend a child robot, we might understand, okay, this is going to be the process of her coming to terms with that grief and that loss by, we imply this whole internal journey by just saying it's a mother who lost a child, right? So pick who your main character is in such a way that we understand why you chose this person to be the one to go through this, and how is their unique internal journey going to be implied by just the pieces and the ingredients that you've given us here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think I have an idea.
Great, yeah. So main character specificity, probably outline your villain for us, and maybe just cut down on these different villainous organizations. We want to know who is the main threat and who personifies it.
Okay, so let me get a second to write this all down.
Okay. I can also just put this in the chat if that's helpful.
Yes, thank you. This will be definitely helpful. I'll take this in consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's do our last one here. We are going to read, was it Azurdi? Azurdi. Hope I'm saying that right. The Timeliner. Oh, you're going to be using text instead of mic? Alright, that's fine. So I'm just going to have to read it out if that's the case. 1 second. And do I have the text up? Yeah, okay. So here it is. Okay. A Seattle police sergeant partners with his Golden Bear spirit guardian on a time-traveling commuter train while on a mission to find his mother. Oh, wow. Okay. So, first of all, spirit guardians are not really sci-fi concepts, so we are crossing over into fantasy already. So let me read this over one more time. A Seattle police sergeant partners with his Golden Bear spirit guardian on a time-traveling commuter train. So remember how we were talking about earlier about having the same source of different speculative elements? It really helps because right now I'm like, now we have two. We're doing the Spider-Man thing. We have a radioactive spider, and we have also this serum that turns someone into a super soldier goblin man. So these things will usually be helpful if they're coming from the same place. If the same thing is causing both of those to happen. If this is a time-traveling train from which he got his guardian, or maybe his guardian opened a portal to this time-traveling train, something like that that just links these things together will make it feel more cohesive overall. While on a mission to find his mother. But he's a police sergeant. Usually a police officer or FBI agent would not be assigned on an official job to locate someone as close as a mother or father. That's usually going to be considered too personal to them, and they would not be the one assigned to do that. So it sounds sort of like this is a personal journey that he's on, and it's not actually part of his work, which in that case, it might be better to use the words, instead of saying police sergeant, we are picking something that is describing this character's tactics or what's going to make him relevant to the story a little bit more. Maybe frame the main character differently. It doesn't sound like he'd be able to really act in the capacity of a police officer while on a time-traveling train with a bear. So I'm wondering how exactly he's going to be approaching and solving these problems. As he says, yeah, it's a personal journey outside of work. Okay, in that case, it almost doesn't matter that he's a police officer, and you might want to pick something else. If you say something like he is, I don't know, he's from a Siberian tribe that worships the bear, something like that just might explain why this guy and what he's going to do in the story might be better use of your words here, rather than saying a job that is not going to apply and he's not going to be able to use any of the tools or tricks of. The other thing is, this is just not sci-fi if we're doing guardian animals. This might be This just sounds like straight fantasy to me. I mean, just because it involves time travel, although time travel is an idea that is often explored in sci-fi, sometimes it's not exclusively explored in sci-fi, and so you can have a fantasy story with time travel. Like, this is just what this sounds like. This is not even really trying to base it in scientific principles, I'm guessing. It doesn't really have that veneer of plausibility that sci-fi is usually going for, which is okay. It just means that it's not quite the emphasis of the class. Question in the chat from Amanda: does everyone have a spirit guide in this world? I mean, if that's the case, you'll definitely want to clarify that. And you say every train passenger on the timeliner does. Okay, so maybe there is some kind of connection between the train and the animals. If there is, you need to emphasize that as much as you can. Connection between train and animals. Yeah, is this the same source of fantasy? Partners with his golden bear spirit animal on a time-traveling commuter train on a mission to find his mother. So is his mother lost in time or something like that? Why can he only find his mother by time traveling? So that might require you to look at your inciting incident, which is that first sentence, and it might say something like, when his mother disappears after a Hadron Collider accident or something like that, might be what really kicks this story off. It sounds like you need that inciting incident in order for this to make a little more sense. Okay, hopefully that gives you some good points to think about there. Police sergeant partners with a golden bear. I'm guessing it's a talking bear, so this will be, I mean, guy partnered with a bear on a magic train. It sounds like a interesting movie. I'm into the idea, and the Timeliner is a cool title. But yeah, try to focus on really. Sorry, does someone have a question? Or is it just somebody left their mic open? I'm gonna have to mute this mic. Sorry. All right. So yeah, try to look at those things that I mentioned here. Something in the chat, you say authoritative cop in high-ranking position versus apex predator. Oh, his mother was kidnapped 20 years ago, and he wants to use his detective work along with the help of the animal to find what happened to her on the day she disappeared. Okay, I like the way you just framed that, actually, and you might want to think more along those lines for the logline. When, you know, this guy who has been wondering where his mother went to for 20 years, he's now going to use his detective skills to go back in time and find her. So yeah, look at that inciting incident, that first couple words to set into place, to just set the story in motion. Make sure that that's that thing that's kicking things off and is setting things in motion. Okay, hope that's helpful for this. We'll just need a few more details, a little more specificity, and a little more clarity. All right, I think that's the. Thank you, Azadi. I think that's everyone. If there was anyone I missed, I apologize. We're 15 minutes over time, so come next week and I'd be glad to give you feedback, or we have many workshops and other classes you can come to. I'll just remind everyone of what's coming up next. And for next week, if you are participating in this Sci-Fi Bootcamp program, you want to decide on the idea that you want to write, the sci-fi movie you want to write, come with a more refined logline that has taken and incorporated the feedback that you've gotten today, and come next week with the idea that you want to write firmly decided on, and that way we will be able to move forward more easily. Let's see, I'll just leave up the schedule of upcoming classes, and I'll open to questions about anything we've talked about today or anything about Script Camp. Anyone have any questions? And you can feel free to either type or use the voice. Looks like we have a question in the chat here. My story has 3 worlds. Let me bring this up on the chat. Oh, we're getting some background noise from someone's mic, so we'll have to mute you there. Sorry. All right, here's the question. My story has 3 worlds: the present time, the past, and the temporal medium, the world that contains all the spirit animals and links the past and present together by train. Oh, is this a question, or is this just responding to another comment. I think it was not a question. Okay. That's okay. Sounds like we have no questions in that case. Thank you so much for attending, everybody. We'd be glad to see you here next week for more sci-fi. Next 4 weeks, same time, same place. We'll be doing sci-fi stuff. Should be super fun, so hope to see you for more of these or any of these upcoming Script Camp events. For members, we have lab today at 4, so we'll see you there if you have questions or pages from anything you're working on that you want more help or feedback with. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your weekend.